This is your AP Government video on the argument essay. The fourth free response question on the AP Government test is an essay. It's 3 paragraphs long where you are going to assume a particular position on a question and you are going to create a persuasive essay. It's 3 paragraphs. 2 paragraphs are going to be furthering your argument and the third paragraph is going to be a rebuttal. This is the video that goes on to try to help you explain that or review information. So in order to write an argument, your paragraph should consist of 4 things. The first thing is the claim, and this is the assertion or the point of view that you are trying to prove. A lot of times the prompts for the AP argument essay, it will either give you an open-ended question or a question in which they've given you 2, 3, or 4 options. If they do give you options, you pick one of those in the prompt that you would like to prove. You also have to add in a line of reasoning. So you can't just restate what the prompt says. You have to answer it or choose an answer and then say why. A line of reasoning is a because statement. I think this is the most true because of this. Once you've created your claim and your line of reasoning, you are going to have to provide at least 2 pieces of evidence. So in the first paragraph, we're going to come up with our thesis, which is our claim, with a line of reasoning. We've now got to come up with a piece of evidence to support this. So your next sentence should be describing a piece of evidence. For the most part, your evidence is going to come from required documents that you've been having to read and study for the AP exam. This would include the Federalist Papers, parts of the Constitution, Supreme Court decisions, also things like Brutus No. 1, the Articles of Confederation, amendments, or the Declaration of Independence. So your evidence sentence is going to pick one of those out that you're going to use as evidence and describe or define what you want to say about it. The next sentence or series of sentences should be your warrant. A warrant is something that explains the connection between the evidence you chose and how it supports your claim and what you're saying and your line of reasoning in the claim. So your evidence sentence should just explain the evidence. The warrant needs to connect that to what you're trying to prove and what you've said is your line of reasoning. This should be at least 1 sentence, if not more than 1 sentence. And you also need to expand on this further with an impact. An impact sentence is, why is this important? What is the broader goal here? You can also just take your warrant and further explain that or explain it in a new way. Your impact should not just restate things that you've said in your warrant or in your evidence. So if you add all these up, this should be your first paragraph. This should be a minimum of 4 sentences, but should be more of a meatier paragraph, 5, 6, 7 sentences. You're also going to do this a second time because the argument essay requires that you make 2 arguments. So for your next paragraph, you're going to basically restate the same claim with the same line of reasoning, and you have to take that line of reasoning you chose and provide a second piece of evidence, and then you're going to explain in the warrant how your second evidence proves your claim and line of reasoning, and then you also have to provide an impact for this second argument. Your third paragraph is a rebuttal paragraph. And in this one, you have to show that you fully understand somebody else's point of view. So you have to take a different stance on the claim or pick a different answer to the prompt, show that you understand it with a line of reasoning, and then you also have to do a rebuttal. Say why your answer is still better than this one. So you have to refute what this other point of view is arguing, or concede certain points and rebuttal the rest of it. This will be your third paragraph. So for organization purposes, it's 3 paragraphs. Your first paragraph should be claim with reasoning, your evidence, warrant, and impact that would support your reasoning for your first claim. Paragraph 2, you remember you're using the same claim and the same line of reasoning, but now you have to have a second piece of evidence, the warrant to explain that evidence and how it backs up the reasoning and impact. And then your third paragraph will be the rebuttal, where you're explaining another point of view and supporting arguments, and then going on to say why your argument is still better. So here's an example question. The Constitution was set up to distribute power between three branches of government: legislative, executive, and judicial. Take a position as to which branch is the most powerful today. So this question has given us three options. You have to pick for your claim if you want to support legislative, executive, or judicial, and your claim must also have a reasoning statement with it. So here's an example of a potential claim. Today, the executive branch of the federal government is the most powerful because it has the ability to make unilateral decisions. Or a different claim. Today, the executive branch of federal government is the most powerful because it can make decisions more quickly than the other branches. Another one, today, the legislative branch of the federal government is the most powerful because they control the power of the purse. Or today, the judicial branch of the federal government is the most powerful because the power of judicial review is more relevant and important than ever. The because statement on the second half of these sentences is your line of reasoning. Whatever you choose for that because statement, you are going to have to come up with at least two examples that you can fully explain and expand on. So the first part is just answering the prompt. It's the second part that's the trickier part, because you're going to want to say something in your because statement or reasoning that you can split into at least two arguments with two pieces of evidence. So let's say that we are going to choose the first one. Today, the executive branch of federal government is the most powerful because it has the ability to make unilateral decisions. Unilateral decisions, if you don't know, unilateral just means you're going to make them by yourself. So we're going to argue in our reasoning that executive branch can kind of do things on their own without the other branches. So now we need to provide evidence that the executive branch makes unilateral decisions. And the AP exam is going to provide you with a list of 3 or 4 items that you can use as evidence. You will have to use at least one of the things on that list. Your second piece of evidence can be from any source that you want, but one would have to be on the list. So here are some possible ones that would come from pieces of evidence from the required readings. Go ahead and read these to yourself. So for these 3 possible pieces of evidence, I've chosen Federalist paper number 70, which talks about why they chose a single executive instead of a committee, and Article 2 of the Constitution, which sets up the executive branch of government. These are likely parts of your required readings that relate to the executive branch and could be possible ones that the AP test would list for a question similar to this. These are also things, that you could use as evidence. The evidence sentence should point out which piece of evidence you're using and kind of explain or define what it is. So let's say we've chosen that first one. So we chose, as stated in the Federalist number 70, a benefit of having a single executive is the ability of the president to make decisions on his own because he cannot blame others for his mistakes. So now we're going to need a warrant. That means you have to expand on the evidence we provided. We used Federalist number 70 as our evidence, and we kind of defined which part of Federalist 70 we're talking about. Now we need to relate this or explain further how we said he cannot blame others for his mistakes. I've got to explain how that supports my claim and the reasoning I provided, which is president makes unilateral decisions. So a possible warrant here. This incentivizes the president to make good decisions because any negative consequence could hurt his re-election possibilities or those of his party members. You would also need to further expand on your argument. So you can do multiple sentences for your warrant if you need to. Remember, short, concise sentences that are to the point are better than long run-on sentences or compound sentences. You can also add an impact if you're looking for something to beef up your argument. So this last sentence down here is a possible impact. This is important because the legislative branch's committee system is designed to make decisions slowly and deliberately. If the executive branch was not able to make unilateral decisions, our government would be hampered by stalemates, which could harm national security. A single powerful president makes the executive branch the strongest of the three branches today. So I've tied in why I think the evidence in Federalist 70 makes the executive branch the strongest. I've also stated why that's important, in this case to democracy or the setup of our Constitution. So my second argument paragraph, I have to restate my same claim and reasoning because I am just providing a second argument and warrant. So here is a way to restate that in a slightly different way. The executive branch's ability to make unilateral decisions makes it the most powerful branch of government. So I'm going to pick a different piece of evidence here. I'm going to go back to Article 2. That was one of the things on the list that we could have used in addition to Federalist number 70. You could also use anything else. Remember, only one of your pieces of evidence has to come from the list given in a question. Article 2 of the Constitution gives the president power to issue pardons and reprieves. So your evidence just has to be something true and factual. You will not have the documents available to you, so you do have to know some general statements about the required readings that are true and factual. You have to provide a warrant to explain why Article 2's pardons and reprieves support your claim and reasoning that the executive branch is powerful because it makes unilateral decisions. So here it says for the warrant, president can issue these for any reason for any persons who were convicted of federal crimes. These decisions are not checked and balanced by the legislative branch. And we can add an impact statement here. Because these decisions are made solely by the executive branch, they can happen quickly and without debate. This can speed up the process by which unjust judicial decisions are reversed. So here I have used a restatement of my claim and evidence. My warrant here was 2 short sentences and my impact was 2 short sentences. I can also add in a sentence to tie it back to the prompt, which is always a nice way to kind of tie up your argument in a bow. The president's ability to make swift decisions and pardons is one reason why the executive branch is strongest. So I've just kind of restated and brought it back to the reasoning that I provided and the answer to my prompt. So the third paragraph is the rebuttal. So this is where you should point out another legitimate argument, show that you understand the reasoning behind it, and then also state why your answer is better. So here's an example rebuttal. Some would argue that the judicial branch is the most powerful because they have the power of judicial review. This gives them the power to determine the constitutionality of laws and government actions. These have the force of law and can only be reversed by a future Supreme Court case. This is a very powerful check and balance on the other branches, but the executive is still more powerful. A case can take many years to go through the appeals court and reach the Supreme Court, but the president can make authoritative decisions much quicker than the courts. So I can show that I understand what somebody else might be arguing about the judicial branch, but I have basically said in my last sentence or two here that I still believe the president's ability to make quick decisions is more important.